was hit or miss whether someone understood what he said or not. The engineer hugged guitar to his chest unconsciously, wetting his lips with his tongue before saying sheepishly, "It's nice to hear your voice, partner." And it was such a nice voice, only that mask didn't obscure it all the time. Perhaps he should get the scout to start wearing that gas mask, though. Yo, could you not? Ugh. Let's see, Chuckling, Pyro shook his head. You've always heard it, you just didn't hear it well. He glanced at the still open door, shifting about anxiously up until now, no one had heard him or seen him like this, and he hadn't even intentionally let the engineer in. He'd figured whoever was knocking would leave when he didn't answer. That's what always happened after all. He shifted about uncomfortably before moving over to where the engineer was, shutting the door. Engineer stepped away slightly, unsure of himself at the moment, especially as he realized the Pyro was indeed naked. They didn't notice that as much as the little errands of old burns scattered across the Pyro's body. But he could barely make out in the dim lighting. One scar was right across half of the Pyro's face. It stood out, receding into his hairline. Must have been an old wound, as there was a wiry hair growing out where the scar was, blending in with his unkempt hair.
That was too much.
There's more. Well, I'll be damned, Engineer murmured, setting his guitar down almost thoughtlessly to reach out with his ungloved hand. Right as he was about to touch Pyro's scar, Pyro turned his head, grunting unhappily at the action, biting his lip. Engineer rubbed the back of his head nervously. He didn't want to upset his friend. Pyro looked mighty distressed. Pyro, you know none of us here. Perfect. Here, he said, offering Pyro a reassuring smile. You don't have to hide all the time. In his head, Pyro leaned against the door heavily, sighing to himself. They already think I'm a soulless monster. It may or may not be a girl. He paused, glancing down at his own genitalia distractedly. I'm pretty sure I'm a guy. He grinned offhandedly before adding on a more serious note. But I don't need them, thinking I'm more of a freak than they already do. He was quite content being the faceless fire starter on the team. He could just blend into the background, almost as well as the spy. That's no way to live your life, Engineer said, regretfully, reaching out and resting his hand on the Pyro's shoulder. And before the man could move away again, just the way they don't know you, and they just don't know you because you never give them a chance. He couldn't blame the other teammates treating Pyro the way they did. Pyro intentionally distanced himself from them after all. Shrugging, Pyro crossed his arms over his chest, murmuring, "Nah, I like it this way." He liked being the one big question mark to everyone, well, everyone except the good old Engie. He was sure the man had figured him out on the first day he set foot off that blasted train. He reached out, pulling the Engie's goggles down, asking quietly, "It's so dark in here. How could you see with those things on?" Engineer blinked a few times, eyes readjusting to the light as he bashfully rubbed his head under his hard hat, letting the item rest on his head comfortably again. "I guess you just get used to it," Engie said with a smile. Before he could say anything else, an odd look crossed his face. Lingard asked, "What's wrong?" I just remember you're naked is all," Engie said, looking away in embarrassment. There he was, sitting around holding conversation like nothing strange was going on. Pyro was standing before him butt naked, and Pyro didn't seem to be too ashamed either. Not that he really had anything to be ashamed of. But Engie was quite sure he shouldn't be thinking those sort of things, so he put them out of his mind. I should go. Your water's probably getting cold." He glanced at the bathroom distractedly before moving to pick up his guitar. But Pyro stepped forward, blocking Engie's way, with a slightly nervous look on his face. "What?" Engie didn't get any other word before he felt Pyro cupping his cheek, tilting his head. He was too shocked to do anything as Pyro's lips pressed to his. He'd never been the most attractive guy or the fittest guy, with little pudge to spare. But there he was, kissing someone he could only describe as beautiful. He didn't care about the burned sky, or the glossy right eye, or how patch hair just quite didn't fit right in Pyro's hair, and she wouldn't change a single thing.
Breathe, boy.
I need a cup of water. Be right back.
Got the jet. Alright.
I'm almost in
So we're
tears.
good so far.
So are we waiting on him now?
He needs water. Who wouldn't after reading that hot scene?
I just kept laughing right in front of him.
I found a really messed up
think
one
it's
that I
fine in
want
the
to read.
background.
Maybe. I don't know.
This is post-apocalyptic TF2. There's no such thing as an empty trade server.
My brother's in the next room, so if I read one, he might hear me and be, concerned.
Who cares?
Look at that hot, sweet caramel.
Good point.
I'll read.
Is the worst over?
He's just getting water, man. The hot stuff hasn't even started yet, probably.
No.
Colton, we
Josh.
essentially
Very disappointed.
Dalton's gonna be like,
the
I trusted
disappointment.
you guys, and you did this behind my back. You done fucked up, sir.
No, we're just capping this back. Yeah,
I'm so
because if we
stoked.
didn't cap this, then they would have won again.
He's gonna press a big button.
I'm so glad
Yeah,
I
this
decided
was-
to play TF2 today.
This was the same server as yesterday.
Our control point.
Started from the top and now we're here.
Oh, it's the pyro.
I'll read the one after Soror
I'm
is
back.
there.
Oh no.
Whoever's pyro spray that is, it's
Oh
really
no.
cute.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah.
Okay, where did I leave off?
Time has been added.
The hot part.
Without hesitation, I engineer towards the bed. The larger man stumbling behind him. He guided the NG into heading onto the bed. Climbing on top before NG could process what was going on. Pyro couldn't remember the last time he'd had any human contact without a suit on. Must have been before his contract even started up. That had been a good 10 years ago. And now that he just started, he couldn't stop. He distracted the engineer with the lovely things he could do with his mouth, and as he unhooked his overalls. Pyro? NG questioned when they separated to get a breath in. Pyro grimaced, shutting his good eye for a moment before grunting in response to the engineer, looking at him as patiently as he could, words just slowing them down. But he listened as NG asked, "What do we do?" He knew quite well what their erections. How could he not have one when he was in such a position? Meant in the kissing, and what it all led up to. What was going on? Despite not having his mask on, Pyro just mumbled something incomprehensible before leaning in and kissing NG again. The engineer decided not to question it as he pulled his glove off, wrapping his arms around the Pyro. He wasn't going to stop when he wanted, and the Pyro's eyes moved soft to the touch. He barely noticed as his shirt was taking off. When Pyro moved to unlace his boots, and he couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Their butt shapes are completely different. He never wanted to impress someone quite like the Pyro. Pyro seemed to be quite content as he tossed the heavy boots away and pulled at those overalls of his, let out a sigh, helping to wiggle out of his uniform. He had grown quite comfortable over the years. Guys, stop it with the semi. I can't read. Stop.
Quit being dick.
I'm gonna go find a quiet place. I fly. Cons.
Soror, go red.
Top
The
3
server's
players on
beautiful.
blue team are all engineer.
Nah, Hatman's a pyro.
Time has
I'm just
been
too
added.
good.
He was an
gay.
engineer. But
Okay, let me
he
just
wanted to
toss up
take-
my spray somewhere.
I think he switched.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, now where'd I leave off? Despite not having his mask, Pyro just mumbled something incomprehensible on before leaning and kissing Engie again. The engineer decided not to question it again as he pulled his glove off, wrapping his arms around the Pyro. He was going to stop something he wanted, and the Pyro's skin was surprisingly soft to the touch. He barely noticed his shirt was taken off. When Pyro moved down to unlace his boots, Engie couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Their body shapes were completely different. He'd never want to impress someone quite like Pyro, but Pyro seemed quite content as he tossed the heavy boots away and pulled at those overalls of his. That was sigh, helping wiggle out of his uniform that he'd grown to be quite comfortable with over the years. And now, Engie couldn't help but feel rather naked as he lay there in only his boxers. Even his goggles had been tossed aside with his hard hat at some point, but he couldn't help but cross his hands over his crotch in embarrassment. Last time somebody had seen him naked when he was back home, and at least a little drunk. Yeah, he felt like that unused broken sentry gun prototype in his workshop. Rusty. What's the matter? Pyro asked, frowning as he leaned over the engineer, resting their foreheads together. I know, not the most attractive guy here. In fact, he was pretty sure he was at the bottom of the list. Eyes widening, Engie shook his head, kissing Pyro gently. No, you're mighty fine, Pyro. He licked his lips and humbly gazed into Pyro's good eye. Just, you and me. Gotta slow down a bit. Jesus Christ, how long is this? Yeah, Pyro said. Yeah, Pyro said in that tone of voice where he obviously thought something was a little touched and someone was a little touched in the head, and Engie's mouth just flapped open and shut for a moment before Pyro leaned down, kissing Engie fervently, his tongue exploring the other's mouth further. Engie's tongue round about his, not fighting for dominance. It was like a hello, but with groping and tongues involved. The sensation of Engie's rough hands running down his back caused Pyro to shiver, a moan slipping from its mouth into Engie's. He'd forgotten how good human contact could feel. But oh, how quickly he could be reminded. He breathed out, not able to take it anymore. He shifted about, pulling Engie's boxers down with one determined motion, and she could cover himself out of embarrassment again. He grabbed the erection. Loving the guttural response from Engie, stroking him purposefully. It seemed like the last time he'd had any sexual contact was when he lost his virginity. That had been over 10 years ago. How bothersome. He murmured. No. I could do that, but I won't. Fuck, I lost my place. He murmured to himself, ducking his head to wrap his lips around the Engie's member. Moaning appreciatively, he rubbed the Engie's thighs in response to the little touches he was receiving from the other man. Engie was on cloud 9. Or if there was a better one, he was on that one. Oh, he mumbled, fingers tracing along the scar on Pyro's left shoulder, adding insistently, Pyro. The other had barely taken a minute at all. He needed more, but to his dismay, Pyro sat up, stopping completely. He glanced at the Pyro who was slithering up towards him, kissing him forcefully. Engie barely noticed as Pyro slipped between his legs, nudging them wider with his hands. When Pyro sat up, spitting on his hands, Engie could only laugh. Hey, what are you doing? Pyro snorted quietly, an amused look on his face as he used his own spit as lube, covering himself thoroughly as possible. Engie quieted down, speechless. Even now, he didn't know what was happening. That didn't mean he entirely disapproved what Pyro started pressing into him. No, his mind went completely blank as Engie reveled in the new sensations. It was like everything he had known about sex was wrong, and for the first time, he was learning about it truly. He wanted to say something, but nothing seemed right. Engie tried again, but found his hand moving up to the Pyro's face, cupped his scarred cheek in earnest. Pyro looked at him with startled, wide eyes. Even the classy ones seemed to be staring at him. Pyro was fully in, but frozen in place as Engie's fingers tracing his scar. It was the first time Angie had seen the pyro unsure of himself, even in that suit, and darling, Angie murmured as they lay together, limbs jumbled together. Next time I won't be on top, if that's alright. Pyro just grunted in response. As articulate as ever, Angie glanced over the bathroom, mumbling about how Pyro was wasting water. I'll crack an eye open, smiling at Angie before groaning and climbing out of the bed to turn the shower off. When he returned, back to the Angie's arm, he asked teasingly, "You know I didn't leave my axe there on purpose, right?" Angie's mouth dropped open and